evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you and welcome to the January 10th business meeting of the Milford Board of Education. Want to dive right into things so we could be cognizant of the weather that's out there. We want to keep people here later than normal. So with that said, we have student recognition. Dr. Fieser?
We do. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope all of your holidays were wonderful and you survived the bitter cold for the last, whatever it's been, 10 days. We're thrilled here tonight to recognize some students from Foreign High School. These are swimmers on the girls swimming team. They were hopefully able to come in December, but were so tied up that they couldn't, so we made sure that they came this evening. So we have this evening Jordan McDonald and Emma Longley, who are sitting right here, and if the two of you would come up, that would be wonderful. Next to them, this is Miss Kristen Scutchus, who is the swim coach. Kristen, if you would also come up. And we want to let you know that I see Mr. Berkowitz is here, and actually your assistant principal, Sean Brennan, and that's it. I didn't know if Anthony Vitale was also here.
No,
I thought he was coming, but that's all right. So, tonight we have the honor of recognizing two outstanding state champion swimmers from Foreign High School. Not only did both of these young women earn the title of state champions last year, but here they are again this year. In fact, they liked the sound so much that they made sure that they could return, right? Let me highlight their accomplishments from this season for you. So Jordan, who is a sophomore this year, earned the Class M state championship title last year as a freshman in the 100 butterfly event, and went on to repeat this title this year in the 100 butterfly. So for 2 years in a row now, she's the state champion. Just a little more about Jordan, what she's accomplished as a swimmer. All-state honors in both the 100 butterfly and the 500 freestyle events. 9th place in the state open in the 100 butterfly. 15th place in the state open in the 500 freestyle. And she remains the school record holder in the 100 butterfly and the 200 freestyle relay. So, not bad for a sophomore. We're really, really proud of her. And then also we want to recognize senior Emma Longley, who is a repeating Class M state champion. To say she's had an outstanding diving career while at Foreign is an understatement. Not only did she repeat this year as the Class M state champion for diving, she also achieved all-state honors for diving. She is the Class M record holder in 11 dives. She is the school record holder in 6 and 11 dives. These are different kinds of dives, I presume. Yes. You can see I'm not a diver. Is the Southern Connecticut Conference record holder in 11 dives, and she placed 5th in the state open. A vibrant competitor, Emma has appeared at the Class M Girls Swimming and Diving State Championship as well as the State Open every year of her high school career. And as Emma is a senior, we also thought that you would want to know, and we want to congratulate her. She has signed a national letter of intent to attend West Virginia University, where she will become a member of the women's swimming and diving team and will be pursuing a degree in exercise physiology. So we want to congratulate Emma. So we're delighted with the accomplishments of both of you, and obviously you're going to be back next year, and we'll assume that you'll be up here as well, which would be fabulous. I also need to honor tonight head coach is Kristen Scutchus, because I think both of you would acknowledge that her coaching is a major factor in your achievements. Ms. Scutchus has worked diligently right beside these very talented swimmers. She has been named the 2017 Southern Connecticut Conference Division II Coach of the Year, an achievement or an honor for the second year in a row. Having been recognized as a 3-time All-State selection herself when she was a swimmer at Providence College, she has shared a lot of experience and knowledge with all of her former swimmers, both the girls and the boys' teams. It is bittersweet that I also inform you that this season is Ms. Gutch's last one coaching at Foreign High. After nearly 12 years of dedication and devotion to her student athletes, she will be out of the foreign pool and into the cheerleading stands where she will watch her son Ethan swim at Vassar College next year. Congratulations to Ethan, and also to you that you're going to be able to step away. I know it's going to be painful, but that you'll also be watching your son. That's fabulous. So we want to congratulate Ms. Gutch's and obviously these two students for what their accomplishments are. I'd like to give each of you a certificate and ask them if you would shake the hands of everyone here. I would love to.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, good luck this year.
Thank you very much. Best of luck.
Thank you. Good luck. Congratulations, great job. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Carla. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Okay, now we move on to student reports. I have Jonathan Lagos first. We have Michael. We have the 2 men today, huh?
Well, Sean is not here tonight. She's at the track meet, I
Okay.
think. So, get started in Guidance and College Career Center news. As of today, the total number of college applications is 784, and of those applications, students have received 96 acceptances. Ivy League acceptances include Ore Opeani, or Opeani, to Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, Rhea Grant to Yale University, and in additional college acceptances, there's the University of Alabama, Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Science, and Tulane University. Let's see, in academics news, we have awards for the faculty and staff. We'd like to, thanks to the Milford Education Foundation for their generosity and support of our school through the Teacher Mini Grant Funding Award to Pat Healy for the Book Launch 2017 program, and to Phil Gianpietro for the Concert Band Masterclasses. Students awards include, well, congratulations to Salma Sami for receiving the Milford Chamber of Commerce Communities Future Award. Let's see, in field trips on Friday, December 15th, students participated in a Unified Sports Leadership Summit in Hartford, Connecticut. And let's see, the English department sponsored an in-house field trip for sophomore students on Thursday, December 21st, where Cindy Boynton discussed her book, Connecticut Witch Trials, to go along with the curriculum during the Crucible reading. In athletic news, track will be hosting a lip sync battle Thursday, January 11th. And boys and girls indoor track are off to a great start with many student athletes already qualifying for the SECs and CIAC meets. Boys basketball is off to a solid start with 2 wins, and girls basketball beat Foreign this past Saturday, making them 8-0, qualifying for state and SEC tournaments. Boys swimming is off to their best start in years, with freshman Ed Platanov already breaking 5 school records. Wrestling has competed in several meets and tournaments and will be hosting a tournament this Saturday at Law. Gymnastics won the first meet against Hamden and will be competing against Foreign this Thursday at 6 p.m. at Law. Ice hockey currently has 2 wins and is starting the SEC competition for the next month. Let's see. In Law Amazing news, we had the annual Giving Tree at Law, and Nationals Honor Society collected and donated presents for 47 children from the Milford community. Music department winter concert took place, and the music department's winter concert was a success with help from the representatives from all the elementary schools in Milford. 12 student musicians are going Friday to the Connecticut Music Education Association, or CMEA, 2-day music festival. The students will be accompanied by Miss Jones and Mr. Gianpietro and Mr. Burns. And let's see, this was last Friday, I think, PJ Day, to support the Connecticut Children's Medical Center. On December 8th, Jonathan Law staff and students participated in Pajama Day for the Connecticut Children's Medical Center, and the school joined Team Abby, who is 6-year-old daughter of Mr. Thompson's best friend. She was diagnosed with a rare cancer and has been going to CCMC for treatment since her diagnosis in November. Jonathan Law donated $1,500 to the medical center as part of Team Abby, and it was a great event for a great cause. And that's it.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, I'm here today. You won't let me know why, so. In clubs news, Foreign's Interact Club volunteered for 2 days at Milford's Toys for Tots. Toys are distributed to families prior to the holidays. In National Honor Society news, we ran a giving tree drive to provide gifts to local families who cannot afford it, and these gifts were distributed prior to winter break. Foreign High School is named as an official Special Olympics National Banner Champion School by the Special Olympics Committee and the CIAC. The unified team also attended a youth leadership summit, and this Thursday, the Foreign Unified Basketball team will be hosting its 3rd annual basketball tournament. Ms. Hoffer, a social studies teacher at Foreign High School, ran a drive before break called the Kindness Connection. Her classes donated items and necessities to the Salvation Army in their efforts to spread kindness during the holiday break. And finally, in club news, Foreign Choir went around the Milford area caroling prior to break, visiting Orchard Hills, Orange Avenue, and various senior centers. In academic news, Foreign Advisories participated in making a better environment around the school by creating kindness chains. Each student in advisory wrote a random act of kindness that they would perform on a strip of piece of paper, and the guidance department put these strips of paper together to make chains of kindness that are hung up around the school. Foreign Spanish department recently partnered with the art department to get a better understanding of the Spanish art culture. Studying Frida Kahlo's painting techniques, the art teachers taught the students the influences behind Kahlo's art, and it allowed them to have a better understanding of the country and the time period. Mr. Caesar's AP Government class began their debates for their mock elections. Classes split up into 4 parties each, and each person leading one party. The elections will eventually result in a president to be chosen. And finally, midterms begin January 16th, along with midterm schedules. In foreign news, Hope Burrows received the Devon Rotary Service Above Self Award for her services to foreign and others in Milford's community. And Foreign also held its pep rally the Friday prior to break, with the sophomores pulling out the win. And the Foreign boys wrestling team and Foreign boys varsity basketball team had beat Law this past week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. So Max and Michael, if you want to head out, drive safe.
Thanks.
Is there anybody here tonight who'd like to speak at public comment? Mrs. Bernie? Yes or no?
I'll wait till you start on the budget. I already have questions. Sorry.
All right, so public comment. There's no other time for public comment tonight, though?
No, I don't.
Okay. So I'll...
I know where you all are.
all right. Dispense with public comment statement. So Chair's report, just Happy New Year to everybody. So I just want to remind the board that we start the budget process tonight with Dr. Fieser's presentation, followed by budget workshops scheduled for Wednesday and Thursday of this week, as well as next Wednesday, and if needed, next Thursday. You have your agendas for those meetings that have been put at your workstations already. So I'm going to ask you to allow Dr. Fieser to get through her presentation tonight, and then if you have general questions or comments at its conclusion, we can entertain them. But as has been the practice of the board for many years, we will dive into specifics and questions beginning Wednesday evening at the first workshop. So just a reminder that if you have any questions, we ask that you email them to me in writing if you haven't already done so. or if, if other questions emerge, if you've already sent some along and other questions emerge after tonight, feel free to send those as well. The Board of Finance public hearing on the budget is scheduled for February 1st at City Hall. That usually begins at 7 p.m. That's the public's opportunity to comment about the Board of Ed and the city budget to the Board of Finance. And then Dr. Fieser, Mr. Riccitelli, Mr. Burt, Mrs. Swift, and myself will present the budget to the Board of Finance on Wednesday, February 7th at 5:30 p.m. in Conference Room E, I believe it typically is, here in the Parsons Complex. It is a public meeting, and you're all invited to attend and to observe if you so choose. And then just a reminder for the board that we'll meet in executive session on Monday, January 29th, for Dr. Fieser's mid-year check-in. And we're going to start that at 6:30, if that's okay with Dr. Fieser.
That's fine.
And I lastly want to thank Pam Griffin and the other board members for, Pam for organizing, board members for attending. The senior bus trip to Foreign that was held prior to the holidays. We took a trip on Durham Bus Donates a Bus. We had 2 buses this year. We went to Foreign's concert, and it was a lovely evening. And I know it was greatly appreciated by those that attended. And that's my report. Do we have any brief liaison reports tonight? Anybody with a report? Okay. Then we'll move on to Superintendent's report, Dr. Fieser.
Thank you, Mrs. Glennon. So I believe each of you are being given a copy of the presentation. So wait a minute, because it needs to be pulled up also. Thank you.
Mr. Riccitelli involved?
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to come before you this evening to present our proposed budget for the 2018-19 school year. I have a quote here from Erasmus, which I think is speaking of the importance of education, is on target, so to speak, when he speaks of it as the hope for a nation. I want to begin by underscoring the fact that when we created the budget, we had in mind the board's learning priorities. We actually had all of the priorities, but particularly the board's learning priorities. I think all of you have maybe seen this. We haven't spent a lot of time. We will be spending some time with you on this, but as you can see, the priorities is that all students would have access to and engage in rigorous learning in every classroom, and that our graduates will acquire knowledge and skills to enable them to think critically and reason, communicate in multiple contexts, problem solve, collaborate, and receive and give feedback. We also, as a group of administrators, established a set of beliefs. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to do this. A set of beliefs that we established a few years ago in creating the budget, and we really try to hold to this when we make our decisions. And as you can see, obviously learning of students is absolutely essential. The whole child has to be taken into consideration, that professional learning of teachers and administrators has to be ongoing. Our schools have to be safe and secure and having supportive cultures, and that recognizing we have 14 buildings, but individual buildings have different needs. So in this budget, we are simply seeking to sustain and strengthen what we have in place. Our programs and supports that we have in place for student learning, the security measures that we have, which are a lot, that we would, again, sustain what we have in place and potentially strengthen them. And then, of course, our buildings and grounds, which are absolutely essential to ensure that they are strong learning environments for our students. Just another reflection here, which is a quote. It's actually not a quote. It's a synthesis of something that I read from David Hornbeck, who was the superintendent in Philadelphia for a long, long time, in talking about and expecting continuous improvement. There's no such thing as good enough. Change and improvement must be constant. We absolutely hold that. We worry greatly about standing still, or even more so with moving backward. So we constantly are looking for ways that we can improve. So again, we are looking to continuously sustain and strengthen. We're proud of the fact that the proposed budget increase that we're bringing forward this year is a 1.393% increase. We believe the increase is appropriate. We also believe that it's responsible. We certainly took in mind the state of the state, but the condition of the state's budget and its potential impact, and we're very mindful of the fact of the support the city has given us and the potential burden the city might have to incur. And so that was very much in our minds as we developed this budget as well. This just gives you an idea over the last 10 years what the budget increases have been proposed by superintendents. You can see that for the last several years, they've been just above or below 2%, and in some cases, the last 2 years, they were below 1%. This year, it's up again slightly over 1% at almost 1.4%. But we really feel that this gives an indication of the efforts that we've made to really keep costs down. So let's move into our priorities. So these are, we have three major areas with respect to the priorities, and they are student learning, climate, and security, and then facilities. And so we're going to go through each. These are our requests for student learning. We are asking for a 1.0 FTE, which is full-time equivalent teacher, for world language so that we can introduce both French and Spanish in grade 6 to all students. This would be done as a trimester of French and a trimester of Spanish that each 6th grader would experience. In 7th grade, they begin to take the language full-time. The cost for this one teacher is $60,000. We also want to launch the Civic and Global Engagement Pathway. This is a pathway that actually was created by the State Department of Education, and we were informed of this in the fall. This pathway we are very excited about. The pathway, obviously the theme is around global learning. It requires students to take 7 credits at the high school level, 3 of which must be in a foreign language, and the other 4 credits have to be in courses that have global themes. Students would receive a global certificate from the State Department of Education if they achieved all of the requirements, which also include that students do some kind of community service project that has some connection to a global theme, and that also they have to do a major project, or what we would consider like a capstone project. But if they do this and they receive the global certificate, it is on their transcript, and it's a real indication of the seriousness with which students took this pathway. There's no additional cost, however, to this, and the reason for this is that we have a number of classes in place at the high school that meet the criteria that the state has established, including the world languages. So we're really pleased that we can launch this in the 9th grade next year, and actually 10th graders could be a part of it as well. But there is no cost for this. We are requesting $75,000 for curriculum writing. This is an increase, a request over what we spent last year, I believe. And the reason for this is the state has adopted 2 sets of standards that are going to have significant impact on our curriculum. One is the next generation science standards, which are going to require major shifts in the way in which we teach science from elementary on through high school. And you're going to hear more about that. We'd like to bring Justine LaSala and possibly some teachers to one of the board meetings for one of the instructional highlights so you can get a feel for this shift that's occurring. And the other is the National Social Studies Standards, which also is going to shift a lot of the way in which curriculum is delivered and the expectations for students. So our curriculum writing is done in the summertime. So what we would use this money for is to bring in teachers across grade levels and in those 2 disciplines to really get at rewriting our curriculum, and there may be some pieces that are going to have to simply be rewritten, but that's to be determined. The last piece is a piece in transportation that we are requesting to support centrally locating our enrichment program. The enrichment program, my understanding is that a number of years ago used to bring students together at a centrally located spot, one of the buildings. So for example, 5th graders would be brought together. That was ended when we moved to K2-3-5, and there were more students in each of the schools in 4th and 5th grade to enable the enrichment program to actually be delivered in the individual buildings. But now that we've returned to K-5 schools, and that coupled with declining enrollment, there are just so few students in each of the schools that we feel it would be really valuable to bring students together so that they could have the benefit of learning from one another and learning with one another around different themes and projects that they would be pursuing. So it's the transportation piece that's the cost of that. So the total requests centered on student learning, our priorities, is modest. It's $157,772. That's the big request. Two of the 2 biggest are the teacher and the curriculum writing. Security and climate is the next priority. We are again asking for a 3rd school resource officer for the middle schools. We've asked for this for the last few years, and we understand that the city is not able to support it, but we really see the SROs as contributing enormously to our schools. And at the middle school right now, we have 2 who are serving 3 buildings, plus a small percentage of time at the academy. And a 3rd school resource officer would allow a dedicated school resource officer for each of the middle schools. One of those would still share a little bit, the equivalent of perhaps a day at the academy, but what it would allow primarily is that there would be a dedicated SRO at each of the buildings, which would be, again, we feel very helpful to students, to staff, and to the whole climate of each of the schools. Secondly, we are asking for $27,000 in security enhancements. And really, there's not a whole lot that's new in this. We have benefited enormously with state grants and then support from the city to put in our schools a number of security enhancements. But as you well know, any security system has to be continually upgraded, and it has to be supported annually, this is really primarily what this money is for. It is to ensure that what we have in place, will be as strong come next September as it is right now. That requires, renewal of licensing and, again, upgrading some pieces, et cetera, and continuing to strengthen the security pieces that we have in place. So for security and climate, our total request is $67,000. Whoops. Okay. And the last priority has to do with facilities and one piece that would be considered other. In facilities, we are requesting a .5 full-time equivalent custodian. And the reason for that is it would be for West Shore. West Shore Middle School, if you have not been there, is undergoing a massive renovation. The square footage in the building is going to increase by 9,000 plus square feet. And that will require an additional .5 custodian. We did the same thing at East Shore Middle School 3 years ago when its major renovation project was completed. We added a .5 custodian, so this is comparable to East Shore, and with respect to square footage, it's comparable FTE to Harborside as well. The other facilities piece that we are requesting is what is called an asset inventory management system. So what I'd ask you to do is I want you to imagine 14 school buildings and every asset minus human beings that are inside the buildings. Everything from the boilers to air conditioners to pumps to controls to fire alarms, thermostat controls to refrigerators and other kinds of systems, to the infrastructure, when we think in terms of every single classroom, the doors, the window roofs, the furniture, the fixtures, offices, etc. When we think of all the technology that exists in the buildings, cabinets, telephones, I'm sorry, not telephones, but computers and projectors and printers and everything else that comes with technology. And much, much more that's part of a school system. Those are what we would consider the assets, facility assets of a school system. What we would like to do is to purchase a management system for those assets. Specifically, what we would like to do is right now, we have inventory of a lot of our, quote, assets. But in truth, they are not necessarily categorized, organized, or systematized. I'll give you an example. There is no system in place for replacement of desks in classrooms. We have 14 schools. We have, at the high schools, 80 to 90 teachers, if you want to talk classrooms, plus additional classrooms. And then, you take that all the way on down to the elementary. What we've been doing and have been doing for years and years is we replace when we think there's a need to replace, as opposed to systematizing such that we would say, okay, in 2020, all 4th grade and 5th grade classrooms will have new student desks, for example. This inventory system would allow us to systematize every aspect of the assets that we have. And not only would it help us systematize in terms of organize, et cetera, but it would be able to tell us, to give us almost, messaging, you're due to replace such and such, in the next year, or this is coming up, or if we do have major repairs, that could go into this so that we know exactly when those repairs were made and we're not looking at it on paper or through files, et cetera. We believe that this system, if it was put in place, that over the long haul would actually save monies because we would have that much more oversight, direct oversight of every aspect of every one of our school buildings. So that's the system that we're asking for, and the cost is $77,000, which we know seems like a large amount, but what we believe it will do for us, for those people who are overseeing all the facilities, et cetera, down to, I think, even the building level, it would be invaluable. And then the last piece that we're asking for is $4,800 for girls hockey. In the letter, the budget letter, I explained that girls hockey, actually, we are involved in a co-op program with Notre Dame in Fairfield, and that girls, in order to be a part of that, have to pay $1,500. The district has picked up $600 for the last few years. leaving the families to have to pick up $900. The previous board in the fall, I'm not even sure how it came up, it might have been with the athletic report that was given in November, asked us if we would look at what was the comparison to what boys were paying, and there's a disparity. The boys used to pay $800 for hockey, and that has been reduced over the last 5 or 6 years to $200. The girls' hockey, as I said, right now they are paying $900. What we are requesting is that we would pick up another $600, is it? $500, another $500, and which would leave then $500 for the parents to have to pay. And then we would, again, our thought was to phase in those reductions to then equalize the girls with the boys. So that's the $4,800 that's being requested for girls hockey. The total amount here for facilities and what we call other with this hockey is $102,131. A recap of our priority request, you can see it amounts to $326,903. Of course, with everything that we asked for, we are also looking for, are there areas where we can reduce the budget or areas in which we can find savings? And we sought, again, to find savings that would offset these. So, in staff reductions, primarily due to declining enrollment, we are going to reduce 3.0 teachers. These are regular education teachers. Let me just say that the letter that you received at the end of last week from me as part of the budget indicated that the 3 teachers, that one of them would be a special ed teacher. That was an error that I'll take responsibility for. It should have been that there would be 3 regular education teachers that would be reduced from the budget. And that is, the amount is still the same, $180,000. Which is what was indicated to you in the letter that we had sent. So there's no change in figures, it's just that there was an error in the letter that was sent to you. I should let you know that the declining enrollment, it continues. However, those of you that have been familiar with the budget over the last several years may be looking at why there would be only 3 teacher reductions when in the past we've had many more. The truth is that the enrollment continues to decline, but the decline is far less next year than what we've seen in previous years. We anticipate that there will be a decline of fewer than 80 students. So with that, that's 80 students across K-12. We looked at it and looked at where reasonably might we be able to, and of course we won't ultimately make the decision until May, but that's how we determined that it would be 3 teachers. I would also say to you that we have often spoken about, used the term economy of scale, which has helped us to reduce our budget. I'll give you an example. If you have 100 students in 5th grade, it's immediately very easy to say, okay, there's going to be 20 students in each of those classrooms, 5 teachers. If we had 30 students in a classroom, we would say 2 sections, and those classes would have 15 students in each. So you see that while the teachers might be comparable in pay, the reality is we're only serving 30 students with 2 teachers, whereas the example with 5th grade, we actually were receiving 40 students with 2 teachers. That's what we talk about with respect to the economy of scale. As the enrollment declines, the economy of scale becomes less and less applicable to our situation, particularly at the elementary level because our schools are smaller, and we have a number of grades where there are only, for example, 2 sections. So you have no choice once you hit a particular threshold that you have to add another teacher, whereas again, if there were more students at a particular grade level, you have a little more flexibility. We utilities and in transportation. In utilities, in particular electricity and natural gas, we found a total savings of $71,754. That's because the costs are going down. In transportation, we are going to, we anticipate seeing a savings of $78,640. And that's due to 4 reasons. One, we continue to consolidate bus runs. Judy Mesologitis, who is in Mr. Riccitelli's office, is phenomenal with respect to her skill in designing the bus routes and, again, capturing savings in the sense of being able to pick up more students for a particular bus run instead of adding on a bus run. We also changed this year at the elementary level and middle school the window of time for buses. It used to be it was 30 minutes for a bus run. It's now 40 minutes. The additional 10 minutes allows us to pick up that many more students on a single bus because you have 10 more minutes in which to go further to pick students up. So that's another thing that contributed to the reduction looking forward. Bridgeport Aquaculture Program, in the past we've needed 2 buses. Our numbers are suggesting that we will only need 1 bus for next year. That's a program, if you're not familiar with it, the aquaculture program is a half-day program for high school students, and we have a number of students at both foreign and law that attend that program. Half-day at either foreign law, half-day at the aquaculture school. And then also we know that there will be a decrease in the gasoline account. So for those reasons, transportation is going to decline and yield this savings. We also have savings in some other categories, other support of almost $100,000, $99,717, and you see right there what the rationale is. Property and liability insurance has declined. We don't need as much money for postage, printing, and advertising. And our telecommunications system, now that every one of our schools is fully up on voice over IP, there's a reduction in costs. So that's for the other support. In educational supplies, a reduction of $63,464. That's due to fewer textbooks needed for this next year, fewer text adoptions, which when we adopt a text, then we're buying whole sets of books, and there are fewer next year that we need. Fewer library books, which may raise a concern, but you need to know that when we went through the reconfiguration, we put a massive amount of monies into purchasing both library books and classroom libraries to make sure there was equity across all of the schools. And at the middle school and high school, quite honestly, there's a real move to purchase more software in the schools and various programs online for students to use as opposed to just books itself. There is also this year, we had the foreign accreditation visit in October. In the budget was $25,000 for that visit. So it's a one-time cost. Laws was a year before. It was in the last year's budget. So that money will be removed as well as part of that. And lastly, under equipment, furniture, and computers, we have a reduction of $103,074. So the savings summary, which you can read all of the various categories, the major savings amount to just under $600,000 at $596,649. When we look at the costs of the major requests that we made versus the savings, you can see that we were able to offset our costs and still have an additional $270,000 just about in additional savings. This pie chart is a different way to look at the budget. This is a pie chart that looks at the categories of the budget and what percentage of the total they represent. And as you can see, salaries is the largest piece of the budget at 71.8%, followed by transportation at 5.42%, tuition at 4.98%, and facilities at 4.60%. Another view of the budget is by object. And if you look at this table, what you see on the left are the major categories. I'm sorry, categories is the wrong term. You just saw the categories. These are the major objects of the budget. And what you have is the amount that has been adopted in the current budget, 17-18, the amount that's proposed, the difference, and then the percent change. And what I would point out is to note the increase in salaries. Salaries is also, well, dollar-wise, it's the biggest piece, needless to say, because it occupies 70+% of the budget. Just under 2% change. Also note that there are 4 objects here that it's a negative change. Benefits, facilities, other support, and educational supplies and equipment. Actually, there's a reduction from the current budget. So just to reiterate, we believe that this budget is going to contribute to safe schools. We believe it is going to sustain and strengthen our facilities. It's going to equalize or move toward equalizing across the girls' hockey. We also believe, first and foremost, that it is going to help us strengthen and deepen learning that's going on in our classrooms across all of our schools. And finally, we believe that it respects the financial burden on the city itself. I like this quote from John Dewey. It takes the perspective of parents, hopefully of parents, but what the best and wisest parents wants for his own child, that must the community want for all of its children. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to be able to present the budget to you, and we'll be happy to answer questions today and in the next 3 budget workshops that we have.
Dr. Fieser, I just wanted to clarify one item on the SROs, because you referred to 3 for middle school, so, or the third. We actually this would make 5 altogether, because we have
Right, but in the
2,
middle schools, it would make 3.
Right.
We have 1 in each of the high schools,
Right.
yes.
So any comments, general questions from the board? Mr. Deanne?
I just have one sort of clarifying. So the 1.393% increase, it's really not an increase. You're not really asking for an increase outside of salaries and things that you're contractually obligated to increase, correct? Because the priority requests are lower than the savings that you've identified?
Well, remember, those are the priorities, but the 1.393% increase is for the total budget. So if you look at the budget summary that exists in here, so on, in the executive summary, if you look on Roman numeral 13,
Oh, in that,
in
okay,
the
sorry.
executive summary, if you have that. This is where every detailed object is listed, and every account is listed.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's Roman numeral 13, after my letter. Keep going. So the bottom line there is that our proposed budget is $93,235. $93,235,155, and you can see the increase over 17-18. The adopted amount, which was $91,954,266. So that's the 1.393% increase.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one brief comment. Thank you for making the change to move towards equalizing the girls' hockey.
Mr. Pawlowski?
Thank you. Would it be possible to get more information on the asset
inventory management system?
Absolutely. We will be
Maybe
able
a
to,
demonstration or something?
I don't know if we have a demonstration, but we certainly will be able to provide information to you at
That was one of the questions
workshop on
that
Wednesday.
came forward to get some more information on it,
Yep.
so during the workshops.
Sure.
Yes, Ms. Hennessy?
It's also regarding the asset management. Are you planning on contracting out someone to do the initial tagging and inventory, or will that be done by Milford Public School staff members?
I'm going to turn to Richard.
Sure. That, the $77,000 will purchase the system, the license, and the first year's worth of work for doing the inventory. And that first year's worth of work will be the 2 high schools, the 3 middle schools, and the academy, which is 2/3 of the district. We anticipate that the following year we would be doing the elementary schools, but we believe that once we have a base of knowledge and we have the system in place, that we may be able to do the elementary schools ourselves.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Any other questions? Well, I just want to thank you for your hard work in bringing forward a budget that seems really reasonable, and I look forward to further discussion with the board over the next several workshops that we have scheduled to kind of dive into some of the specifics.
We do as well.
Okay, then,
I'm-
yes.
I'm sorry, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
On the slides, if we go back to slide 8 for a moment. On the budget request,
Sure.
Graph.
yes. Can you just remind me, what was the first year that you did the budget, Dr. Fieser?
Well, I started in April, so the budget was pretty well set at that
April
point.
of what year?
Yeah,
2010?
in 2011. So the
Okay.
first budget that I would have done would be the 12-13
Okay.
budget.
We can see very clearly what your budgets look like.
You know, you grow up with 9 kids, you learn how to live.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, so if there's no other general questions or comments, we'll move on to the next agenda item.
So the next agenda item is the academic calendar.
All right.
So, I want to do some follow-up with respect to the calendar because I know the board had asked us to pursue some pieces. The board asked us, first of all, would we move a few of the dates in the calendar itself. The first one was, we were asked to move the October, early release or early dismissal day from that first week and move it to the 10th. Subsequent to meeting with you, we learned from the college board that on the 10th of October, PSATs are given. This is across the country. They indicate the date. It's non-negotiable. So instead, we moved it to the 17th of October. Secondly, you asked us to, the February day, to move it from the 6th. We moved it to the 27th. Actually, it was on the 13th, and originally there was discussion of moving it to the 6th, but then the request was could we move it further into the month, and so we moved it to the last week, which is the 27th. So that's that piece. The second thing that you asked about was with respect to kindergartners. Kindergarten orientation, you asked if, for us to look into that further. You asked specifically, would we look to see, could we find childcare if kindergartners were going to start on a Wednesday for the first full day? Is there a way that there might be childcare, et cetera? So we checked into that. Interestingly enough, and I never knew this, the YMCA, that is the only week of the year that they close. And they close down their facilities so they can clean them from top to bottom. So the why was, it was not possible, but the good news is that we contacted Boys and Girls Club. Boys and Girls Club talked with their board, et cetera, came back to us and said, yes, they're more than willing to help us out on both the Monday and Tuesday of that week and provide, daycare basically for kindergarten children, if families would like to take advantage of that. So,
That would be at their facility, correct?
that would be at
Their facility.
and at no cost.
Oh, no cost, nice, but parents would have to get their children to that facility
Correct.
over, okay. And they feel they can accommodate all of the kindergartners, if that was the case, then it.
Well,
Or,
I mean,
you know,
they
uh-huh.
felt, they couldn't
Confident,
remember,
okay.
they, right now, I believe they have over 200 students
Okay,
that they
right,
work
yeah,
with,
all right.
so.
Okay, I just want to acknowledge that we did get only three emails from the public regarding the calendar. The board received one, directly, relating to the, Christmas break and the February break. And then there were two others who had some concern about, the staggered start for kindergarten. But and childcare was one of the reasons for their concern. But as far as I'm aware, those were the only, pieces of feedback that we got from families. And coupled with, I don't recall ever getting any feedback, relating to, the start of school over the past several years, when school actually started, so.
I did canvass the South Central area districts, which is the region that we're in with ACES. I think there's about 29 districts in it. I heard from most people. The vast majority of districts, kindergarten kids come in for the full week. There are some districts, however, that have kindergarten kids come in for half days. And there were a handful of districts where they may come in the second day, or the third day of school. One of them, for example, was Woodbridge, if my memory serves me correctly. New Haven kindergarten students start later, like more than a week later than other students do. So, just to let the board know about that.
So board members, do we have any further questions or comments on the calendar that's been proposed to us? I would suggest, and I think there's maybe some board member agreement here, correct me if I'm wrong, that, I'm willing to support the calendar that's been presented to us for this year. I do have some reservation about the, holding the orientation at the same time that school's in session, but I'm willing to give you guys a chance to work it out, and I know you always come through and put something together that works really well for our students, so. But since it is not mandatory any longer that we follow a regional calendar, it might be good for us to take the opportunity to ask for some input from families by way of a survey with some specific questions that maybe we can solicit input from the board. Maybe in the fall, when after the start of school and we see how that goes.
Sure.
I think that might be a good way to go for future years, for future calendars.
We'd be more than willing to do that. You remember we did that
Yep.
5 years ago or something when we had the 13 snow days.
Right.
What would be helpful, we don't need to do this now, is if there are specific areas that the board would want us to make sure we include in the
Sure.
in the survey.
We can work on that, yeah. All right, so if there's no further questions or comments on this, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approve the 2018-19 academic calendar as presented by the administration.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Mr. Fermender has seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is a set of 4 policies for a first reading. Use of cellular phones, bullying prevention policy, health and communicable infectious diseases, I'm glad to go through each one of these. If we look at the use of cellular phones, which is the first one in here, this is a revision of the existing policy. Anything in red is new language. This policy actually had been reviewed in 2011, so here we are 7 years later, and there's substantial changes in this. Believe it or not, cell phones have become so pervasive in schools that you can see that we're even talking about the use of them and smartwatches at the elementary level. So times have changed, and so this policy seeks to establish very specific requirements for what we're supposed to do in the schools, and also gives a strong guidelines to parents and students for the use of cellular phones. If anybody has any questions?
Ms. Penzance, no, it's just.
Excuse me. I did notice that you referred to cell phones and smart watches, etc. I'm wondering if, just to make this so that it is a lasting policy for a little while longer, if we could change the wording to personal communication device and then kind of define that as things like cell phones, smartwatches, tablets, etc., because that could really be a lot of things at this point. You know, and I'm just thinking, if you're so specific about a cell phone or a smartwatch, perhaps there's some wiggle room in this policy. If other things aren't named.
Would you mind if I asked Mr. St. Germain, who oversees all of this and has expertise beyond most of us? Are you comfortable with that, or if we added that to it?
I think it makes a lot of sense, yes.
And would we want to give examples?
I think, yeah, personal communicating devices such as cellular phones, smartwatches, and we could.
But then it's not exclusive. It's
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe even, I don't know, would you go as far as to say, and technology developed, well,
I think if we just
if future
I think
technology
et
that
cetera
could
is
accommodate
great.
personal
Yeah.
communication.
Steve Jobs is gone, you're not allowed.
What's next?
I might suggest too, for the subject then, that use of, it should be personal communication devices rather than just cellular telephones, because this policy goes well beyond cell phones nowadays. Mrs. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to hear maybe just a little bit, since we have some middle school administrators here. Is this a concern at the middle school in enforcing this? Is this same as what you have today, or is this more strict? If that's okay, Dr. Friesen.
It's a little more strict, and the current policy says they're allowed to keep them on them. So this policy will allow us to have them keep them in their lockers, and I think it's a good thing.
Okay.
Unless there's there's certain situations of a medical reason that a student might have to have them, or educational purposes, but that's a different story.
Okay, I was just asking, because I know the middle school students are like, they're in between, right? Elementaries, you definitely don't want them to have them, but the middle school, they think that they're ready to have them, but you realize that they're not. And when we're talking about the smartwatch, so if someone has like I have a Garmin, like a Fitbit, and it has a touch screen, is that something that they cannot have?
I would think that that's not a communication device.
Okay.
Personally, because you can't communicate through it, it's just tracking your steps.
Okay, right, because here it says touch screen display, so.
Yeah, if we change the definition to allow for personal communication devices, as Aaron suggested, that wouldn't include a Fitbit, I wouldn't think.
So what this does by having this open language, there are developing newer and newer of these Fitbits that have the capacity to read text messages, et cetera. So then, in general, when we do these policies in the past, what we've done is we created the general language, and then we allow for the administrators to do what they think is best with students and interpret it. Similar to the Congress creating laws, and then we interpret it through the judicial system. That's essentially what we're doing here, is we're creating policies, and then These folks are responsible for enacting it, and then we learn from that process.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. DeYoung?
I have a couple of questions. First, it mentions a couple of times in here academic purposes. Can you give us a couple of examples of what an academic purpose for a cell phone would be?
Sure. Well, sure. There are some surveys that, programs and apps that can be used to survey and sort of quiz a group of students and get results that pop up on a smartboard. So some sort of interactive technology, games, I guess I would say.
And so how would they, if the students are now required to keep them in their lockers at the middle school level, would the teachers say, go to your locker, get your cell phones and bring them back? How would that
It would
work?
require advanced preparation. So the teacher would say tomorrow would be used in this. It's hard because not every student has a cell phone. So
Right.
you don't want to exclude. And a lot of the capabilities of what a smartphone would do can be done on a Chromebook in the classroom. So but we didn't want to close off the possibility of it being used for an
Sure.
educational purpose.
Okay. The other question I had was, do we currently provide Wi-Fi for the students and/or faculty in the schools? Okay. And then on the second page, where there's talk of taking, disseminating, transferring, or sharing of obscene, pornographic, lewd, or otherwise illegal images, will this be extended past the school day? In other words, if a child's at home, sends it to a friend at 8 o'clock at night, is there jurisdiction there for the district? Or?
There could be, if, for example, and this is in the law, if electronic devices are used for bullying purposes, regardless of where it happens and when it happens, the school has to respond.
Okay.
So we would, certainly anything that's pornographic, we would immediately contact the police.
Sure.
If a student were to bring in something that he or she received, if a threat came through, we would follow through the same way. So in some areas, there's a distinction where we don't have jurisdiction, but if it's going to impact on the schools, we step in.
Okay.
Rather than holding off.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So I had some kind of housekeeping revisions. So in the first paragraph, second to last sentence, therefore, the Board of Education says revised cell phone policy. I'm going to suggest that we remove the word revised because it's just our policy. It's revised, we're revising it now, but it won't be revised once we adopt it. Just saying that the Board of Education cell phone policy addresses the use of these devices. In the first bullet at the elementary level, no use, so I'm going to guess that will say no use of a personal communication device. It should say will be permitted during school hours, I believe. And then at the middle school level, it should be the same verbiage, I think, as above, using the personal communication device. So I'm guessing, my understanding is that all throughout this document, there'll be consistency with calling them personal communication devices rather than cell phones, smartphones, smartwatches, whatever. The very last sentence on the first page, the board says the board reserves the right to revoke this privilege. I think it should say the board authorizes the superintendent or his or her designee to revoke this privilege. I don't think we would actually be doing the revoking. And then on the second page, the first sentence says that if the student fails to adhere to the following guidelines, I don't know if the word following should be there. Because I don't see any following guidelines. Would it be appropriate to just say if a student fails to adhere to the guidelines and or the board's acceptable use policy? And in the third paragraph, the one that Mr. DeYoung was just speaking to, the third sentence down, I think it should say commonly called texting instead of testing. And that was it for me. Any other questions or concerns on this policy?
I'll just say there should be a comma in that third paragraph after any person taken.
Oh, man, I had that too,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I forgot that one, yes,
Yeah.
comma.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
That same paragraph, the third one down, after texting, it it goes on to say, the next line down, any person taking, comma, disseminating, or sharing.
I got you.
There should be a comma. Okay, then this policy will, they'll make the revisions, they'll bring it back for a second reading at the next meeting. And if the revisions are satisfactory to us at that time, we can approve it, or we can, send it back for more revisions if we feel it needs it. Okay? All right.
So the next policy is on bullying prevention and intervention. This is, again, some major revisions to this because there's been some changes in the law. The biggest change is that teen dating violence is now considered a form of bullying, and is officially then part of the policy. We have in here the definitions of everything that constitutes bullying, and where it can occur, et cetera. These are also in the administrative regulation. We felt that it was important to have them in the policy itself, so that people would know what are we speaking about when we talk about bullying. There again, you see cyberbullying was in the original policy, but teen dating violence, and then it's defined any act of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, including stalking, harassing, and threatening that occurs between two students, et cetera. That's officially bullying.
Dr. Fieser, can you just quickly explain the difference between the policy and administrative regulation for the board?
Yes, policy, the Board of Education sets policy, and the policy is sort of up here with respect to a declaration on, this is how the school system is going to be run, so to speak, by a set of policies. The regulations are then how do we carry it out. So for example, with the bullying policy, in the regulations, there are all kinds of requirements about when a bullying incident occurs. There's steps then that automatically have to be pursued. There's forms that have to be completed, an investigative report that has to take place, et cetera. All of that would be in an administrative regulation. Coupled with that, the state mandates that every school have a safe school climate committee. We also have to have a district climate coordinator. So all of those are all in the regulations. They wouldn't be in the policy. This policy happens to be mandated by law, so there's language in here that's straight out of the law. But even with it, there's regulations that we then have to put in place in order to make sure we honor the policy appropriately.
So the regulations are internal, more or less, unless the board is required to vote on the regulations, which we normally don't have to do. Normally, we don't vote on regulations. The superintendent develops the regulations to carry out the policies that we've directed her to carry out. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to make sure the board understood the difference. Was there further explanation on this policy, Dr. Fieser?
The one thing that I'm wondering about is that I see in the bullying, an official, legal definition here is for mobile electronic device, which is different than the term that we just suggested that we were going to be using. So I get concerned, we really can't change this term. So what I'm wondering is, does this maybe capture, might we use this language in the policy on cellular phones?
I was thinking that too. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. The only things in here that I think we may not have really been thinking about are a laptop computer, but if a child were to bring their personal laptop computer to the classroom, that could also be inappropriate as well. So I think that it is good to have all devices kind of encompassed here, particularly if you've already got the verbiage.
Okay, so we'll use, so just so the board knows, we'll use that term, mobile electronic device, for the, in place of the cellular telephone and in place of what was suggested as the personal communication devices. Okay?
It is good to be consistent, yes.
I agree, I was thinking the same thing. Just as I'm reading this description, apparently it seems to be, it's a bit out of date because it talks about a text messaging device, a paging device, a personal digital assistant, and I understand that's the language that's required. The only thing that seems odd to me is that it doesn't specifically call out a cell phone or a smartwatch, so we may want to, if we can, add that in.
We could do that, you know, we can, I'll shoot an email to our attorney and with some modified language that would include that.
I mean, they're kind of broadly covered, but they're the most obvious ones now.
Or I wonder if it might be overkill, but if we potentially added another definition for personal communication device and just say it encompasses all of the above plus if there are other things that we would want to include. If legal says, no, you need to leave that exactly as it is. I would think you could add to it, add something.
We'll ask.
I had a question on, so the subject of this, called bullying prevention and intervention, is there any need to reflect the teen dating violence in the subject line? Can you ask about that when you're contacting?
For bullying prevention?
For this particular policy, it's called bullying prevention and intervention, but you stated that teen dating violence needs to be included, so I'm wondering if that should also be reflected in the subject of the title of the policy.
Except for that there's multiple kinds of bullying. So if we just put teen.
No, I mean bullying prevention, intervention, and teen dating violence, if you add it to.
The title?
Yeah, that wouldn't be appropriate. I'm just asking if.
I wouldn't think it would be appropriate because there's all kinds of ways to bully.
Okay.
You know, you see that there's a different definition for cyberbullying.
Right.
And then at the top, bullying itself is defined. So I think,
It seems to me, it just seems a weird policy to interject teen dating violence into me.
well, it's the law.
Yeah, okay, enough said. I had a question on the second page, at the end of the first paragraph, there's a sentence in parentheses in red. I'm just wondering why, it seemed out of place, and I'm wondering why it's even in parentheses.
I was gonna ask about that as well.
The second,
Yep, I see it.
page 11.
Um,
Yes, yeah,
So my mind's a little fuzzy.
I know mine was too.
This was, I know that this was suggested language because it's in red, and I think it was, well, the reason that this is in here is to make sure that if there is an incident that that we are pursuing it, if a student is in our school district, if the student is not in our school district, it's not us. It's the other school district that has to. So I know that that's why that's in here. Why it's in parentheses, I'm not sure, but I think it's to clarify that any of these situations that occur, if we take action, it has to be action with respect to the student being one of our students, not, so something happens outside the school, if it's a student that attends St. Mary's for the sake of conversation, we don't have any jurisdiction over St. Mary's. We would obviously let them know, but we would not be pursuing it ourselves.
Okay. And the last question I had was on the next page under comprehensive program. I just found the whole first paragraph a little awkward, and just was hoping that you might be able to just look at it and see if you could clean it up a little bit. Specifically, I had circled, let's see, that the word is essential. Let's see, blah, 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 to be responsible for the program to improve the school climate involving everyone in the schools and community to address bullying at all levels is essential. I just found it an awkwardly worded sentence.
Okay, we'll look at it.
Yeah, I see.
And then the last thing was on the page 6 or 7 for the policy. Third paragraph up begins not later than January 1st, it's being corrected to 2014.
Right.
Can that whole sentence, can that be taken out, or do we need to keep that in there? I mean, it's already been done, it's a past tense.
So what we would want to do then is state that the Milford Board of Education shall approve the Safe School Climate Plan developed, actually, it would be the superintendent that would approve it. Because, again, that's required by law.
But, I mean, but it's been done, correct? I mean, it's done once, or?
Well, except for the plans changed, so for the sake of conversation, when we reconfigured our schools, each of the elementary schools, there may have been changes simply because of the ages of the students now. So they're reviewed. Also, there may be changes on the district level with respect to the district incident management control document. I forget what it's officially called. So if there's some changes on the district level, that may also impact the Safe School Climate Plan in a school.
Okay. So you can take the date out, though, since
Yes.
it's already been done, and you'll change the Milford Board of Education to the superintendent?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Pulowski?
Thank you. Sort of following up on what you had already mentioned, that red sentence in parentheses on page 2. That, it does seem out of place, and I was wondering if that would make a lot more sense on page 1, at the end of the 3rd paragraph. It says students who engage in bullying shall be subject to school discipline up to and including expulsion. Kind of seems more as a follow-up to that paragraph rather than a follow-up to the definition of bullying. Maybe it was just dropped into the wrong spot.
Could be. So we certainly, that's a good suggestion. We can move that.
And also one note, the hostile environment definition ends in a semicolon. Every other one ends in a period.
I'm sorry. Where are you?
On page 2, the definition for hostile environment ends in a semicolon.
Yep, okay. And would you just, I was just looking as to where you suggested to put it in, but I see now where it is.
And one final, just kind of general comment in regard to Sue's mentioning perhaps putting teen dating violence in the headline. In that 3rd paragraph on the 1st page, teen dating violence seems not included in bullying because we say students who engage in bullying or teen dating violence. So it's not, so we're almost saying it's separate than bullying instead of a part of bullying work. I mean, later on we kind of, it seems like teen dating violence is included in bullying. Maybe that language in that 3rd paragraph should not be included there. Or maybe it should say students who engage in bullying, including teen dating violence.
Should we just say and?
Right. We could do
Ian?
I'm sorry,
Not
I didn't hear
being
you.
just included.
Including
I didn't hear you, Mr. Vermender.
I was just saying if we said, students who engage in bullying, I said we could use, instead of or, use and. As a, or you, like they had also said, including teen dating violence. Either one, I mean.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm wondering if in the definition at the top of the page on page 2, that we should say that it includes teen dating violence.
Yes. Dr. Fieser, do you know, I'm aware that of the law that was passed, but did the law specifically say that it must be put into this policy?
According to our attorneys, yes. But again, I'll confirm that. In fact, I can remember the email said that the piece you need to understand that's the newest and the most important is that teen dating violence is now included as part of bullying.
Okay. Mr. Arnold.
Yeah, going back to that sentence about the student whom the activity is directed, seems backwards, because you really don't have any control over the person, like who you can control is the person, the aggressor. That's the only, to say that, oh, they're not in our school district, we can't help you. If the person who is doing the bullying is from here, you should be able to have control. I don't get that from that sentence.
It says they both need to be in the same school district for us to.
But I don't think that, I don't think that really serves the purpose. You wanna keep people from bullying.
So this is, so this refers to the victim? So the victim, needs to be in our school? You know, it says the student against whom the activity is directed must be attending the school in the same district as the students engaged in the activity. So in other words, the two should be in the same building? That's not to suggest that
The
if
same
we,
district.
if we had a student, and this is beyond bullying, but if we had a student in one of our schools who committed, you know, assaulted someone and had a knife when the process of the assault, you can be guaranteed we would take that up, hands down.
Right, but if the student is in the act of bullying, whether it's to somebody in our district or somebody else's district, isn't that the problem? Or because I'm bullying somebody in Stratford, I'm immune from the policy?
Well, I think in that case, what we would do is get in touch with Stratford, because clearly, I mean, you know, we wouldn't just sit on it and walk away from it. But I think the issue becomes, you know, are we in a position to conduct an investigation? Well, the person that, you know, how do we do the investigation unless both schools were to come together and do a joint investigation?
Gotcha.
I think the main issue, though, is that this particular language is mandated language. We're told that the state says you have to have this sentence in your policy.
And I'll verify that again, but all of this red language, we didn't create. This
Right.
was all.
Right, yeah, it came from.
Do we have, correct me
Mr.
if I'm,
Pulaski.
correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have language in this policy for that particular sort of situation, like if one of our students in our district was bullying somebody in another district. Right, that's not a written policy anymore.
Well,
Should that be added? I mean, I'm just wondering if that is something that we should add to this.
so with the difficulty that we have is if the student is denying it, we're not in a position to be able to conduct an investigation. Generally speaking, if something like that occurs, the police get involved. I mean, there are building principals here, am I correct in that? Ms.
Yeah, well,
Berkowitz?
we have dealt with situations like that. Obviously, I appreciate your concern, and we feel the same way. I think there is difficulty in investigating it, but what we would do is we would get the police involved, number one, because we have an SRO in our building. We'd make them aware, and if the victim or the perpetrator was in another school district, we would call the administration of that school to kind of collaborate on how to prevent it in the future. Those are the two main things that we would do,
So it's
and have done.
So it's just like a known set of, this is what we do if this happens, but we don't have it actually written down in policy.
There's nothing that I know that's written down, except that's what we've done.
So we would hold students accountable on our end, but as far as bullying to carry through with the formal investigation, our hands are tied, because the victim is not in our building, for example. Or vice versa. The victim's in our building, but the person who's doing the bullying is not in our building. Did you want to add something?
If I may, I think you gotta remember part of this process is an investigation to verify if there's an act of bullying, and so there's rights that are guaranteed to both students in this situation. So in order for us to conduct that investigation and give due process to both of those students, for us as in jurisdiction, it would have to be within our district. So we talked about the bully and the bullying. We've already made the assumption that there's an act of bullying. Part of this process is we have to have a verified act of bullying before we call it a bullying act. So we need to make sure that we allow the due process to go through. So a lot, what I heard just recently, we're kind of jumping to, well, there's the victim and there's the bully. You've already, tried and convicted that particular student. We have rights for all of our students involved. Obviously we want to protect students, that's why there's this law, but you also have to go through a process. So to do that equitably, we need to have that jurisdiction where we can do that investigation.
Ms. Fazio, do you want to add anything, since you oversee all the bullying in the district?
Yeah, no, I think what Mr. Burt had just explained makes really good sense with regards to, in order to do our due diligence with regards to an investigation, both parties have to be within our district in order to interview both parties with regards to that situation, and give them both an opportunity to share their side. But with that being said, as Dr. Fieser had articulated earlier, each building has a a school climate safety committee. Each building has a school climate specialist, whom I work with directly to conduct investigations. And there is a very specific protocol that we follow within the district as it relates to those investigations. So if and when maybe sort of a gray situation were to occur where something's happening outside of the district, the school climate specialists know to either go to their building administrators or come to me if there's any sort of further guidance that's necessary. So it's definitely a part of our procedures that are more defined through the regulation than they are in the policy with regards to someone being out of district. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions or comments, concerns on this policy? All right, then this also will be edited and brought back for second reading next month.
Right, and we'll check on some of those questions, the legal
All right,
pieces.
very good, thank you.
And the next policy is health and health medical records. And again, this is a revision. So, nothing that good. This was reviewed by both the health department as well as by our attorney.
I had one housekeeping, fourth paragraph. Again, it's a little awkward. There will be a health room, comma, in each school, comma, with adequate facilities, including a lavatory, a locked medicine chest, a refrigerator, a telephone, and a sink, period. That makes a little bit more sense to me. And then cross out in each health room. Yeah, this, paragraph? This is redundant here.
Okay.
I should say in each school. There will be a health room in each school with adequate facilities. Did anybody else have anything in this policy that they wanted to look at?
The big piece here you can see is the whole piece on medical records. You know, with HIPAA and the privacy laws, and then also the cumulative health record, that would be part of the policy.
And that was all pretty much boilerplate language. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments on this one, we'll put that aside and bring it forward next month for second reading with that one revision.
And the last one we brought forth is on communicable infectious diseases, and this again was reviewed by the health department as well as our attorneys.
And again, I think it was pretty straightforward. I didn't have any changes to this one. Okay, seeing none, then we'll bring this one forward next month as well for second reading. Does everybody understand the process for the policy work? Okay, great. All right.
The next item on the agenda is our personnel report. Mrs. Pascal?
Thank you. We have, excuse me, this month we have the job postings, personnel recommendations, retirements, resignations, terminations, and stipend appointments, as always. Pretty fairly typical month. I just wanted to point out that, I think I mentioned last month that the retirements for the end of the year were starting to come in, so you'll notice we have, I believe it is 4 teacher retirements on this report. And I think for a total this year, we're up to about 7 advance notices of retirement for the end of the school year, which is pretty typical for this time of year. So we'll keep you apprised on that. That's it.
Can you refresh my memory on the job postings? What is the after-school grant position? What are those?
The after-school grant.
The wave
Oh, the wave program.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's right. West Shore.
Oh, I was wondering if that's still operating, right?
Well, it did not receive state funding until just recently.
Okay.
So it did not operate for the first half of the school year, but we anticipate that it'll be starting on January 22nd.
Oh, great, okay.
And that was directly tied to the state budget that wasn't passed.
Right, all right, very good. That's a great program. Yes?
Can I just ask for clarification? What is the WAVE program?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The exact acronym.
And he just left.
He just left. Mr. Cabana, it's at West Shore Middle School. It's funded through the state. It's actually in partnership with Bridges, Community Health Services. And
Oh, man,
Dr. Kowalski may be able to shed a little bit of light. I'm not sure what the acronym is. We can get that for you for sure.
I can look it up.
But it's an after-school program. There's many students from West Shore that stay for that program. You know, there's homework, there's all kinds of activities, academic and recreational and social. So it's phenomenal.
I think the W is for West.
There's about 100 students that participate in it, and one of the pieces of the program is to really try and incorporate the family. There's communication all the time with the family on what is going on, and I know they have, like for example, a major activity, generally speaking, well, I was going to say in the spring, but I'm not sure when they're going to be doing it now, since they're just starting up here, but where families come in and with their kids engage in a whole series of activities through the evening. Most of the courses or classes, activities, actually West Shore teachers, a lot of them participate in the WAVE program, or other staff members on staff. You know, I don't want to suggest it's 100% West Shore, but it's a huge percentage of West Shore, so the relationships with the kids is really powerful. There's a lot of team building, leadership building on the part of kids, really, activities to have kids reflect on their behaviors and, helping them to really be successful.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have the acronym.
There you go.
West Shore achieves visionary education.
Thank you.
Great. And the other question I had was OT assistant.
Occupational therapy?
Well, I know it's occupational therapist, but we normally haven't had assistants, so.
Right. So we had a resignation come through mid-year and.
.6.
And it's so hard to get a .6 employee. And we had worked with a CODA in the past who knew the kids and we knew she was very good. And the pay difference allowed us to hire her 1.0 instead of the .6 for an OT. So, and it's temporary, it's for the remainder of the year. And then we'll go back to our .6 OT, who will be returning.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So she works under the direction of an OT?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Basically, yeah, a little long-term sub, which we can't get.
Right.
All right, very good. Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Pazin on the HR report?
Thank you.
The next two reports, Mr. Riccitelli will address the quarterly budget report and the disbursement report.
Thank you, Dr. Beasley, many members of the board. We come to you at the end of each quarter and give you a report on the status of the budget as of the end of that quarter. So at this point, obviously, we've completed half of the school year. So this report covers from July 1st of 2017 through December 31st of 17. What you see on the report is, the bottom line, and at the end of each column to the right-hand side, you'll see the available balance in each account, and you'll also see the percentage used. What that percentage is, you would say, okay, we're 50% of the way through the year, so we should have spent 50% of the budget. But what we actually do is we encumber the dollars that we're obligating, or we encumber the dollars that we know that we're going to need to spend. So, for instance, wages. We know how many employees we have, and we know how much money we're going to spend on wages. So we encumber those, which means that they are reserved, they're obligated, and they can't be touched for any other reason. So that's why you see, and let me back up for a second. All of the account numbers and the titles of the accounts are the exact same ones that you'll see in your budget book. If you look at that executive summary that we referred to, those are the exact same account numbers. For every account, there's sub-accounts. Every school has its own, well, just for example, computers. Every school will have a computer account, and so there's sub-accounts. But you're seeing the high-level account numbers. And so, and again, they're broken down by category or objects. So the 1,000s are salaries. The 2,000s are employee benefits. 3,000s are contractual obligations. 4,000s are utilities and facilities and maintenance, and so on. So those are the major account numbers, and we give you a snapshot of where we are, what we've spent for that period of time, and how much money we have, how much money we project that we'll have for the end of the year. Because we come to you on a quarterly basis, I want to assure you that we don't just look at it every quarter. We're looking at the budget virtually on a daily basis, but certainly on a weekly basis. No expenditure can be made in the district. We have tight controls. Those controls follow all of the generally accepted accounting principles, and also the general accounting government accounting standards board, GASB, principles. And so one thing that I'll say to you, and then we'll get into a few of the actual items. One thing that I'll say to you is, and this may seem kind of different or odd, but budgeting is not an exact science. We look at salaries. Salaries account for 75% of this budget. Roughly $51 million of this budget goes towards salaries. And for every salary that there is, for every person in the district, for every position, there's a salary associated with that position. But every time somebody resigns or takes a leave, that changes. And so that's a small example, but the budget is constantly changing. What I will say to you, whereas I'm saying that budgeting is not an exact science, the accountability and through the auditing process is an exact science. The auditors will come in and they will look at every single dollar and they'll make sure that we've spent it appropriately in accordance with those accounting practices. And so, I want to assure you, I said this at the orientation, the number one responsibility that a member of the Board of Education has is to ensure that the dollars that are entrusted to the board are spent responsibly, and you entrust that responsibility to us. And we take that tremendously to heart. And that's why we're watching the budget all the time. If we see a situation where we think that we're going to be in trouble, we immediately react to it. We're projecting months and months out before, so that if there's an area, if there's an account that we believe that could be in deficit, well then we've got to identify other areas in the budget where we've got to pull back on in order to cover that potential deficit in that account. So that at the end of the year, you're going to have a balanced budget. That's what the law says, and we're going to ensure that that happens. So with all of that said, just a few of the highlights that I'll point out to you. I already said salaries is the biggest part of this budget. Certified salaries for teachers alone is almost $45 million. So that changes all the time. But what we've projected is that if everything were the way it was on December 31st, we could end with $159,000 surplus in that teacher account. But things change every day. We get, Mrs. Kapazna will tell you, we get, people request leaves, there's maternities, anything can happen that can go up and down. One of the questions that always comes up, and it's part of the budgetary process, after 2 weeks from now, after you go through the workshops that we're going to have, you're going to have a much greater knowledge of this budget, a much more workable knowledge of how the budget works. But retirements, account number 1130, retirements. We generally have, the average is 18 teacher retirements per year. So that's what we budget for. And what you see there in that retirement line is the amount of money that will pay out in contractual obligations at retirement for approximately 18 teachers. Some of the other areas, electricity and that's account 4100 on the bottom of the first page, but more so, the following page, 4101, heat, energy, and that's natural gas. This is where we were on December 31st, and we're projecting a slight surplus in that account. However, that was before this cold snap hit. And so things like that can make the budgeted items vary in many different directions. A couple of other items that I'll point out to you, accounts 5101 to 5103, special education transportation. You'll often see those accounts in deficit. That's not unusual. The district is eligible for what we call the excess cost share grant from the state of Connecticut. And so when we exceed a certain amount of money, and we take this into account when we budget, when we exceed a certain amount of money for special education transportation, or accounts 5600 and 5601 for special education transportation, those accounts are all eligible for the excess cost grant. And so we'll receive money back from the state. It actually goes to the city, and if we need it at the end of the year to cover a deficit, we request it from the city, and they're obligated by law to give it to us. And so, again, you'll often see those in deficit, and I point out, don't get alarmed. We know that they're in deficit. There's a huge unpredictability for special education costs, particularly, and we'll talk about this much more. Mrs. Swift will talk about it during the budget process. But the individual needs of a student dictate what the costs are going to be, both in transportation and in tuition costs. And so there's great variation in special education costs. And I think at this point that's where I'll stop. As I said, the items that you see here, the dollar amounts that you see here are either encumbered, meaning obligated, and we expect that that's what we'll pay by the end of the year, or actual purchases. So with that.
Questions, Ms. Federico?
Thank you. So I'm trying to just make sure I understand the logic behind what goes in encumbered and what does not. So if we look at the line 1130 for the teacher retirements, the budget was based on the average of 18 per year. The encumbered is still assuming that you're going to be at 18 per year, 18 for this year?
Correct.
Okay. And there's a little bit of a difference in an available balance. Does that come from maybe somebody retired but they didn't get what you estimated per person?
We've had some retirements and we've paid out. And yes, we don't know who the people are that are going to retire.
Right.
So we don't know what their actual payout is going to be. So we work off an average.
Right.
In some instances, we have an idea who may retire for that particular year, but again, we predict.
No, I get it. You'd have to work off an average. Now, how about on an account like 5604, where it's the tuition for Trumbull-Voag?
Yes.
Why would that not be encumbered? Because I see other tuitions in encumbered.
Sure. They didn't bill us yet.
Okay.
In that particular case, different. As you see, there's other areas of tuition that we've either paid or we've encumbered, but Trumbull-Voag has not billed us yet for it, so we just haven't encumbered the money. Or
okay.
Bridgeport, it's on Wednesday.
No. Is it?
Well,
only
it shows, well, it hasn't encumbered
15,000
anything.
of it. But $150,000 was paid.
Right.
Trumbull's the only one with nothing paid or anything.
Did you have any questions? Any other questions?
No, that was it.
Ms. Pinsens?
What is the freeze account, 6,000?
Sure. That is the 6,000 accounts and some of the 7,000 accounts are based on a per pupil expenditure. It's a formula that we'll talk about at the budget. But that's an area where the principals have some discretion over how they could spend their money. It's things like the amount of paper that they'll need, the amount of consumables that they will need in that school for the different curriculum items, notebooks, things like that. And what we do is, as an insurance account, we say that 10% of that we're just gonna hold in case we have at the end of the year, in case we're coming to an area where we think that we may have problems, we will hold that money back. Once we get to around March and we're through with the third quarter, if we believe that we'll be in a surplus for that year, we give the principals the ability to spend that money. But we hold it kind of as a small insurance account over any possible problems that we have toward the end of the year.
Thank you.
Mr. Zentovich?
Yeah, just a question on what 5602 is, tuition ECA.
Sure, that's the Education Center for the Arts. That's it's a program. Maybe Mrs. Swift or Dr. Fieser can, Mr. Burke can. It's our students spend time here in the district, and then we transport them to ACES in Hamden, and it's an educational center for the arts. They have visual arts, the musical arts, etc.
So it's I spoke about the aquaculture program earlier, where it's a half-day program and students are bused. This is a Bridgeport program. ECA is offered by the Area Cooperative Educational Services. So I don't know for how many years the district, long before I came here, the district has been a part of this. And so we have, we went into an agreement years ago as to the number of students that, we would support financially because we pay a tuition for them to attend. And so they spend half a day here, and then at both law and foreign, and then we transport students. They leave 11:30, between 11:30 and 12, and they then go to ECA. And so kids are in drama, there's kids who are in art, music, etc.
Thank you.
Mr. DeYoung?
Just a quick clarification on the freeze account.
Sure.
What would constitute an issue that might arise that would require you to use those funds?
There, yeah,
Be anything.
there could be anything.
A really bad weather?
Really bad weather winter. Really bad
Winter weather.
where if we spent everything else in the district and we had a huge bill for natural gas, we could dip into the freeze account.
Okay, I misunderstood then. I thought that was just for the principals to provide
No,
additional, okay.
The board would be able to say at the end of the year, we're going to transfer that freeze account money to cover the deficit in natural gas.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Other questions on this report? Okay, seeing none.
And then we have the disbursement report.
Okay, sure, as usual, each month we come to you and give you a listing of all of the expenditures over $1,500 that the district pays out the previous month before. And so you see the listing of every check that we wrote that's over $1,500. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have with regard to that report.
Can you just clarify, I think I know the answer to this, but I'd like to hear it. Page 35, about a quarter of the way down, there's a payment of $1,545 to a Board of Ed parent for mileage reimbursement?
Yes. That is, by law, we are required to transport to vocational schools like Platt Tech. If there's a Milford student who for some reason couldn't get into Platt Tech, and chooses to go to one of the other ones, we will, by law, we're required to pay up to a certain amount of money for the parent to transport them.
Okay.
They have to give us their vouchers, their mileage reports and things like that. And we have to get reports from the school as to the attendance of the student, just to verify that the student was there, that the parent did transport them, and then we reimburse them for the
Okay, so
transportation.
it's in lieu of a bus or a cab or something like that, so.
Correct. Yeah, and I think this year it's Emmett O'Brien Tech in Ansonia that we're transporting, or we're
Providing-
reimbursing a
right,
parent for
right.
transportation to.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions on the disbursement report? All right, seeing none, we can move on to the consent agenda. Ms. Federico?
I make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves consent agenda items, consideration of minutes of the December 11, 2017 business meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we have no new business. Is there any board comment this evening? I'm looking forward to the budget workshops. Okay, motion to adjourn?
I'll make a
Federico?
motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 857 drive safely home, everybody.
You
I'll
too.
save it for Wednesday.